Health Minute is brought to you by St. Francis Health. We listen, we heal.
And welcome back. Well, a new survey shows fewer young people are using e-cigarettes, but another form of nicotine is growing. Mandy Gaither reports.
It's a highly addictive substance that's especially dangerous to young people. Nicotine can be found in all tobacco products.
But it can also harm the developing adolescent brain and also prime the brain for addiction to other drugs. And so it's critically important that youth aren't exposed to these products.
Data from a newly released survey shows a nearly 25% drop in students reporting e-cigarette use the past year. That's about 500,000 fewer youth using the devices, bringing the rate down to the lowest it's been in a decade.
We still have 1.6 million kids who are using these products, but it's still a very important win.
But there's a growing concern about nicotine pouches, which are small and dissolvable and placed between the lip and gum. Experts say sales have been rising since 2016.
We're going to continue to monitor use and also do everything we can to make sure that we do not see any further rises with regard to these products in future years.
To help prevent tobacco use, the American Lung Association says parents should talk to children about the health dangers and the unpleasant physical aspects like bad breath, discolored teeth, and nails. Give them clear, consistent messages about the risks, making them aware of all the products this includes, and set a good example by not smoking or using tobacco in any form. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.